So today we face an opening that is dear to my heart, and that is the Caro-Kann. That's been my main opening from the black side for many years now. And of course, I believe that the Caro-Kann is a sound opening that is playable at all levels, right up to World Championship level. So we cannot expect to get some crushing advantage or anything like this. However, in making this video, I'm relying on my last very bad experience playing the Caro-Kann, where an opponent played a very tricky line against me that I simply hadn't seen before, and I underestimated it, and within only a few moves I was completely lost. It turns out that this opening system is quiet at first glance, unassuming, but actually very deadly if black doesn't know how to react. And if they do know how to react, the position will still be around equal. So I think it's a great system to know, and let's jump right in. After the move pawn to e4, black will play the Caro-Kann with pawn to c6. And now, of course, the main line is sort of the classical way of playing chess. Let's grab the center, pawn to d4. And objectively, that's probably the best way to handle the Caro-Kann. But this move might be much more effective in getting good results because of the fact that Caro-Kann players are not going to be quite as used to this. Now, it's still a normal move, and so I played what the Caro-Kann move would be, which is pawn to d5, and I contest the center. Now, for starters, there's already one kind of tricky line if you really like positional chess. One tricky and trendy line in recent years is knight to f3, and it turns out that after pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, queen takes queen, king takes queen, it's not the subject of today's video, but this position is actually a little bit better for white. So if you want some ideas and you like this kind of slower positional play with the queens off the board, this is one for you to look into. Now, having said that, what I'm going to suggest today is the move knight to d2. Now, in playing in this way, this is the so-called Breyer variation. In playing in this way, white simply supports the center, and you know, at first glance, it really doesn't seem like much, right? In fact, black is able to grab the center here with pawn to e5. But if we take a look at the database, the most popular move already is a mistake from black. Black, typically at the non-professional level, they take on e4. And after pawn takes e4, they play e5. And they think, well, here we just have an equal position. And maybe I even have this, and maybe the knight is not so well placed. But it turns out all of this is wrong, and white is already significantly better. Let's show how the play could continue. Knight to f3, targeting this pawn. Most black players here, they go bishop to g4, looking for that pin. But now comes h3. If you drop the bishop back to h5, we can actually win a pawn with g4, bishop to g6, and now grabbing this pawn. That's a very common mistake. And even if they take here, bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, we now have the bishop pair. We're going to put this bishop on c4, and our position is very good. Here's actually one strong plan. After they develop, you go bishop to c4, and the most common move that I saw here is already losing. Very often black plays knight b to d7. And you can pause the video if you wish, otherwise I will show what the winning move is here. And that is queen to b3. Queen to b3 is very nasty because it hits the pawn on f7 and it hits the pawn on b7. And it turns out that there's just no good way to defend them both. So that's an example of how dangerous this line is. Now, even if after this black plays something better, you know, like bishop to c5, here's one nice suggestion. The f5 square is very juicy. And so we play knight to f1, and we play knight to g3, and we're looking for knight f5, we're looking for bishop g5, maybe rook d1, and castle. All of our moves are so easy to play, and black actually doesn't have much of a plan. And of course, if black tries to stop these ideas with g6, we see that this knight is going to be unstable. We're going to be able to put our bishop on g5. We can also put our bishop on h6 and hit the rook. So the position is very dangerous. In fact, computers say that this position is already winning for white. So yeah, this is a very nice plan here. If you try to remember this knight f1, knight g3, knight f5 maneuver, is very powerful. So where did this all come about? I'm showing you what many players actually do from the black side when you play this move knight to d2. They basically say, okay, there's a tendency in chess. It's like a general, not principle, but a general phenomenon, let's say, in chess, which is that the less strong or experienced the chess player, the more they tend to like to just make exchanges whenever possible. So it's no surprise that this exchange here is the most popular response. But we can take advantage of that because we know it's not a good idea. They exchange. Now with no exchanges, they grab the center. We target that pawn. And again, what's the most popular thing? Pin when you can, right? That's very typical. But again, here h3. If they move the bishop back, we just kick them out and grab this pawn for free. And if not, they give us the bishop pair and we can set up all sorts of tricks here against f7. I cannot. Okay, I think I'm done trying to draw queen f7. But you see the idea here with bishop c4, queen b3, like we just showed. So this is already a very nice thing. But what happens when they don't go pawn takes d4? Well, when they don't do that, and at the higher levels, what they do is they play e5. And that's actually what I did in my game. Now, here's the idea. We go knight to f3, and we target this pawn. Now, most of the time here, black plays the correct move, bishop to d6. You can do other things. I don't know, for example, black might try a move like knight to d7, but here already they're in a little bit of trouble after pawn to d4. Because let's say we take here, we take here, we take here, and we just exchange everything, but the dust has settled and we have two very good things in our favor. Number one, they have an isolated pawn here on d5, and number two, that knight isn't really happy to be here in this pawn structure because it gets rid of, it blocks the vision of the bishop, and you know, the knight would much rather be on c6, where it would coordinate much better. So that's another way for black to go wrong. But let's say that they continue to play right, bishop to d6. Here's the idea. We go pawn to d4, so far so good, and again we invite black to make a mistake. They should capture. The only way to get a good position or get an equal position is to capture this way. If, for example, they play pawn takes e4 instead of pawn takes d4, now we swoop in with our knight into the center of the board. We're pressing e5, we're pressing the bishop on d6, and it's very bad. I mean, things can get extremely ugly. Let's imagine that they take this pawn. We go queen takes d4, we're hitting the bishop, we're hitting the pawn. Already they have to play this horrible looking move, bishop to f8. So this is another poisonous variation. So after bishop to d6, d4, black has to play pawn takes d4. And now here's the idea that I was not familiar with. Bishop to d3. And at the time I remember thinking, okay, I know this player. I know that his style is aggressive and dynamic and maybe not 100% correct openings, but openings where it's very easy for the black side to go wrong. And when I looked at this in the analysis afterwards, I realized, man, not only is it very easy for me to go wrong, but actually the move that he's played is the move that the computers consider best. And that's where you want to be. That's the sweet spot in chess openings, because you're playing the objectively best moves, so you're insured even if your opponent plays the best moves themselves, but you're also setting up a lot of traps, which means that you know, you have a pretty good chance of just finding yourself in a much better or winning position out of the opening. Now, where I went wrong is I played the natural move capture here on e4. And my idea was that after knight takes e4, I would play bishop to b4 check. And I thought, hey, you know, how bad can this be? I expected the move bishop to d2, bishop takes d2, queen takes d2, knight f6. And I thought, you know, we're probably going to get some position like this. Maybe queen f4. I thought knight takes, queen takes. Maybe I go queen e7, queen takes, king takes, knight takes. And I thought, you know, should be about equal. But I was hit instead with a very unpleasant move. And that is, he immediately played pawn to c3. And this is the best move. And incredibly, in this position, black is already objectively lost. It's just too many tempi. Black can take this pawn, for example. That's what I did. But now, white just castled. And I it suddenly dawned on me, we're only on move 9, and it suddenly dawned on me, whoops, I'm probably lost here. How can I develop my pieces? It's so difficult to do. For example, let's say that I had tried the move knight to f6. White could take this knight, and now I can play queen takes f6, and now white would give this check. And now how do I block the check? Well, if bishop e7, they go bishop g5, and they hit my queen and the bishop. What about bishop e6? Well, they can still go bishop g5, and my queen has no squares. So that's a very nasty idea. I also thought maybe I should play like this and just play g takes f6. But then I thought, well, after pawn takes, bishop takes, rook b1, even something like this, where am I going to castle? Do I want to castle into this pawn structure? Not a good idea. Do I want to castle into these open lines? Also not a good idea. So this position is also winning for white. So what can I do? Maybe instead of knight f6, I thought, why not bishop to e7? And that's what I did in this position. But white can just play rook to e1. And now I still cannot develop. I wanted that knight f6 with the possibility of recapturing with the bishop. But now, if knight f6, knight takes f6, my bishop is pinned. So if I have to go g takes f6, this is once again not where I want to be. And I thought after rook e1, maybe what I need to do is a move like bishop to e6. But here, the problem is the pieces start to flood my position. Knight f g5, for example. My bishop is hit. What can I do? Let's say bishop to d5. They can even take like this. There's many different ways that you can go. As I try to develop my pieces with knight f6, white can go queen e2. And again, it's really difficult for me to castle, because if I castle, they're going to take this bishop. If pawn to h6, for example, maybe I can think that's a good way to stop things. Well, knight takes d5. Now the bishop is targeted. So maybe I recapture with the knight, and now we see the problems. Knight takes f7. It's just a tactical minefield wherever I turn. King takes f7, queen e6 check, king f8, and bishop to g6. And this mate on f7 is unstoppable unless I sacrifice my queen for just the bishop. So, you know, I sunk into thought for about 25 minutes or so at this point, and I realized I think I'm just fried. I played the move knight a6. That was my best bet. And as far as I recall, my opponent captured here. And then after knight to c7, now I'm not 100% what move my opponent played. Perhaps something like knight to d4. But the point is that when you check this position in the computer, I mean, black still hasn't managed to complete their development, still doesn't have much of a clear plan. And yeah, the computer says black is hopelessly lost here. So yeah, this was not a pleasant experience. And so let's turn an unpleasant experience into hopefully into a more pleasant one, and let's try and play this from the white side against our unsuspecting opponents. You know, if you can't beat them, why not join them? So yeah, after d4, what can black actually do? Well, don't do what I did, which is, e takes d4, bishop d3. Don't do what I did, which is to take this pawn on e4. But what happens if black plays like maybe the best move in the position? And that's considered to be knight e7. Well, here we still have some tactical ideas. We castle, and after castle, we take this pawn on d5. Now black should take with the knight. And now we take this pawn on d4, and we fall for what seems to be a trap. We blunder a pawn. And when I say blunder like this, I mean that actually black can take it. We're about to show it. But maybe the best way for black to play is actually to ignore all of this and maybe play a move like knight to f4. Target our bishop. And maybe there I think it's just about equal. Like something like knight c4, drop the bishop back, get rid of this knight because it's a strong piece. Now support our knight on d4. And yeah, black has the bishop pair, but we have centralized minor pieces, so it all roughly balances out. The position, the computer say this is basically completely equal. So this is if black plays near perfect. But what happens if black goes for the greedy move? And that's the one that I saw most players go for. And that is bishop takes h2. This is the blunder that we were talking about. Well, after bishop takes h2, we take it. Queen h4 check. King g1. And this is their point. So they've won a piece. Sorry, they've won a pawn. But after knight f3, we target their queen. The best square is to g4. And now we just play rook e1. And incredibly, in this position, there's only one move that keeps the position equal. Everything else, we have too much of what we call an initiative, too much activity with black's pieces still stuck on the board and the queen a potential target. So black needs to play knight f4. Now bishop takes, queen takes, and we still target the queen. And after queen f6, we blunder another pawn, the pawn on b2. And yeah, we're down a pawn, but we have a big attack. Let me just show you in this position, if black takes this second pawn, they're objectively already lost. So that just goes to show how much danger there is in this position. Let me show you one sample line. Rook e1, bishop e6, let's say, a natural move. Now rook h4. And you see the danger against this king with the minor pieces largely undeveloped. Now black can try and stop it, but now in comes knight d4, targeting this bishop and importantly, cutting off the queen from the defense. Black tries to develop, and bang, rook takes h6. And you cannot take this knight because of the fact that this bishop can always move and win your queen. Black can try to hang on. I mean, if black takes here, this is just going to be lights out here after queen takes h6 because the bishop and the queen combine. So, for example, if black tries to find an escape square, there is this typical idea. Check, 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 and now check. And the point is, whenever you take, we're checkmating you here on f7. And okay, you can run with the king, but this is not gonna, you're not gonna live for long with your king on d6 in, you know, queens and rooks on the board. So that leads to checkmate. So what should you do instead after rook takes h6? Well, black can try a move like knight f6. But now after rook takes f6, we see every sacrifice just works. Pawn takes, and now we still storm the kingside position with queen h6. Black can try to stop the mate with f5, but now we just lift the rook, and we've got rook g3 mate, and in some situations rook h3. It's impossible to defend the black king. And my own fate in the game ended up quite similar to this. I can tell you it was not a pleasant experience. And so you see that this variation of bishop to d3 is very, very dangerous. Let's do a very quick recap. Basically, after e4, c6, we're going d3. It's a quiet move. d5, now we go knight d2. Quiet, but very deadly system. If black here plays pawn takes e4, which is the most common move, we get this position, which is actually better for us. And the idea is that we had here, for example, the most common move is the one I'm showing, and now we just kick the bishop away. And, we don't kick it away. If the bishop goes back, we play g4 and grab this pawn. If not, bishop takes, queen takes, we get this position, and we're going to put our bishop on c4, threaten here, our queen on b3, sometimes take here, our knight will transfer this way, create a massive attack, and it turns out black just doesn't have much of a plan against these against this setup. So that's if pawn takes e4. That's the first trap of sorts, a positional trap that we set on our opponent. Next possibility, black plays the right move, e5. We go knight f3. Now in this case, once again, if black doesn't play bishop d6, then they get into trouble. We showed, for example, if knight d7, we have pawn to d4. And one idea I forgot to show, black often goes bishop g4 here. But now we go bishop e2, and you know what the most common move is that black plays? It's knight d7. And this is already a losing move. You can pause the video if you want, I will show it now. Okay, so it's a losing move because after pawn takes d5, we actually just win a clean pawn. If black plays this intermediate move, we take with the bishop and we defend the pawn. And if black takes this way, now we see the point of capturing here, which is we take on e5. And the point is, if knight takes e5, we pick up this bishop. So an eye for an eye, but we picked up a pawn. And if bishop takes e2, we go queen takes e2, and now we see that idea. By taking here, our queen is defending our knight. So very, very nasty point here. And again, another trap that hundreds of players have fallen into. So instead of knight f3, bishop to g4, what they do is they go bishop d6. So bishop d6, now we play d4. We break in the center. And again, next trap, trap number 3 or 4, I'm losing count, is that if pawn takes e4, knight takes e4, all of our pieces are flooding into the center of the position, and black is in trouble. So black should play pawn takes d4, and now this clever move, bishop d3, the one that caught me completely by surprise. How did I go wrong and get a losing position 3 moves by move 9? It was by playing pawn takes e4, the greedy move, knight takes, bishop b4 check, expecting bishop d2, but getting hit by the hammer blow of pawn to c3. Sorry, pawn to c3 here. When after pawn takes, castle, I'm up 2 pawns, but I'm completely lost. I just cannot develop in time. There are too many active pieces, and yeah, it was. I tried to save the game, but no luck. So that's extremely dangerous. And even if black plays better than I did in the game by playing a move like knight to e7, even here we can still create some tricks for our opponent by playing like this, swapping everything in the center and inviting the very tempting bishop takes h2. But now we're once again gambiting a pawn after this whole sequence, but we're forcing black to move their queen around a bunch. And here actually black needs to be really precise to not lose. The only move I think that the computer considers to give black a chance to stay in the game is to move knight f4. So you can already imagine how nice it is to play this position when you know that if black plays bishop e6 or bishop f5 or knight d7 or rook d8 or any queen move, all of those moves are going to give you anything from a small to a big winning advantage. So yeah, it's a very, very dangerous system. I'm glad that I got the loss out of the way, so to speak, and I'll be more prepared next time around that somebody plays this system against me. And yeah, good luck playing it yourself. Let me know how it goes if you do play it. And yeah, if you like this video, as always, drop a like, helps me out. And I will see you in the next one, continuing our Win with 1 E4 series.